with the development of some of our policy position papers when it comes to public safety, violence against our women and children, and the other areas that the subcommittee addresses. And as we pull in other work too with domestic violence, our shelters, and all of the other areas that we focus in on to restore our families. And so with that in mind, I asked for support to develop and submit a written comment to the U.S. Department of Justice regarding the 16th Annual Violence Against Women consultation. So Vice Chair Brown, as you recall, this is the same type of consultation that we attended in person, was it 2017, and where we talked about some of the issues to provide services. So with that advocacy, we're now able to get a tribal set-aside from the Office of Victims of Crime, and that is a non-competitive grant. It's based off of our population. So this year, Navajo Nation received about $2.3 million, and that will be used to provide additional victim services. And that grant starts in January, but the team is already connecting with other with service providers, and will provide a report to the Oversight HEF, Health, Education, Human Services, and hopefully to Nabakeatin or to the council on what additional resources are needed when it comes to providing services when our people are a victim of crime. So I wanted to give you that preview because what we're waiting for right now is for Ms. Lewis to join the line. And so I'm going to pause, and we haven't formally started our meeting. We're still waiting for one more committee member, but I'm going to see if Ms. Lewis, were you able to join the line?
Madam Chair Crotty, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Sadeja.
Okay, all right, great.
Okay, thank you. So I hope I was just trying to give the committee and those on the line a little bit of background in terms of how we're moving forward with this written comment. I know it was a short turnaround for your team, so I appreciate the time and the energy that went into this document. I think in reviewing it, there's a lot of solid recommendations, and of course, we wanted to contribute and now looking at how we could contribute to future statements when it comes to the violence and ultimately the healing that needs to happen on the nation. So Ms. Lewis, I'm going to turn it over to you. We're still waiting for quorum, but if you could provide the committee a complete report, it's on the record, and we'll provide this information to our colleagues who are not able to join us on the call today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair Crotty and members of the committee. First, I just want to begin first thanking Chairwoman for your leadership and advocacy on this sensitive topic. You are absolutely right in that it touches nearly every Navajo person's lives on the Navajo Nation. So we understand the importance of this issue, and we look forward to assisting Navajo leadership in advocating for all of us. So the most recent tribal consultation letter, or the most recent invitation to consult, and to which we responded, I believe you guys have the comment letter dated October 22nd, 2021. And this was in response to an invitation from the federal government to consult on the violence against women. And this was part of their 16th annual government-to-government tribal consultation. And so in order for the Navajo Nation to, so our approach to drafting these comments was to look at the past year and look at comments and meetings that were held. And the Navajo Nation Washington office was typically a participant in many of them. Like for instance, when we had various stakeholders meet with the government accountability
Ms. Lewis,
office.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to, let's pause. Staff, can we make sure everyone's muted? I'm hearing music in the background. Thank you. I'm still hearing music. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's important for me to hear your words because we're documenting this. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. I apologize for the interruption. Please continue, Shadeja.
Thank you. And so we actually gathered a number of testimonial statements, including yours, Madam Chair. We wanted you to have tried to have a comprehensive approach as we prepared these comments. So some of the other meetings that we looked at were, again, the meetings that were held with the Government Accountability Office, testimonial statements made by you and other members of the public. We also looked at some of the legislation that the Navajo Nation supported during this past year. And so some of those items include, just give me a second, I'm trying to pull it up here. The comments that were delivered on the Not Invisible Act Commission, and those comments were developed and rendered on September 17th, 2021. We also looked at some of the comments and the purposes for S-1853, Bridging Agency Data Gaps and Ensuring Safety for Native Communities Act. We also looked at some of the testimony, past testimony, and also the record supporting Savannah's Act, and that was, passed in May 14, 2019. We also looked at HR 1585, reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act, and just looking at what the federal government had committed to in terms of supporting tribal governments and tribal communities. And so as we approach the 16th annual government-to-government tribal consultation on violence against women, we wanted to try to ensure that not only did we review past statements in the past couple of years, but we did reach out to critical stakeholders, including the prosecutor's office, members of Navajo Nation Council. We were also, the office of, the Division of Public Safety. So we tried to make sure that we were connecting with key stakeholders on this matter to ensure that the recommendations put forth by the Navajo Nation were supportive of what our communities and what our Navajo Nation departments and divisions needed. So in the short amount of time that we had, we compiled the letter that was shared with the committee this morning. It's an 11-page document, and we are more than happy to supplement the record with any additional comments that this committee has. And I hope that everybody had ample time to review it. Again, we are grateful for your leadership, but also everybody else's contributions to this issue and this topic. I'm happy to go further in any, just to expand on any aspect of these comments. And I believe that concludes my report, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis, for that overview and some insight in terms of what documents were used to support the position and assisting Navajo Nation in not only drafting but submitting this in the time frame. I just want to ask the committee, has any other delegates joined the call?
Good morning, this is Vice Chair Smith.
Oh, yeah, it's Vice Chair Smith. Thank you. We're waiting for quorum, but as we wait for quorum, we're reviewing a report by the Washington office that was submitted on the office to the Office of Violence Against Women. That was sent out to the full council maybe about 15 minutes ago. And so thank you for joining the call, Vice Chair.
Thank you. I'm just listening in for now. I'm just kind of curious about the redistricting in Arizona, what's that going to take and what's happening and how that's going to impact Navajo Nation. We are predominantly in the portion of Arizona, and I know New Mexico is also on the agenda, so I appreciate that update. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Smith. So I believe the redistricting conversation is happening at the state task force meeting. We
Okay, I'm
appreciate you being on the call. So it looks like we do have Delegate Eugene So on the call, so that so we do have a quorum. So at 10:29, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Lorene and Miss Woody, Static, can you provide a roll call, please?
Good morning,
Chairwoman,
Madam Chair.
I'll be leaving. Just wait, because I'll be leaving the call. Thank you for surprising me of that. There's so many numbers that you just press. You guys have a good day. Okay,
Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair and honorable members that are on the call. Today is Friday, October 29, 2021. Special meeting for Sexual Assault Prevention Subcommittee of the Navajo Committee. On a roll call, Honorable Amber Kanazbakrati.
Static, this is Delegate Amber Kanazbakrati. I'm present. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Crotty, your location?
I'm here in Window Rock. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, and your location?
Yeah, it's been Delegate Brown is present from Danahoto, Navajo Nation. Yeah.
Good morning. Honorable Vince James, and your location?
Delegate James present in Ganado, Arizona.
Honorable Wilson C. Stewart Jr. I believe he's excused. Honorable Eugene So, and your location?
Eugene So, Spider Up, Arizona.
Thank you. Honorable Paul Begay, and I believe he's excused also. So, Madam Chair, you have 4 members present. You have a quorum to conduct your special meeting. Thank you. Back to you.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Shada, for the roll call. As I get myself situated here, Miss Shada, Lorene, can you read the agenda into the record, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Proposed agenda of the Sexual Assault Prevention Subcommittee of Navajo Committee of the 24th Navajo Nation Council. Special meeting through telecommunication Friday, October 29th, 2021, 10 a.m. Presiding Amber Kanazbakrati, Chairwoman Nathaniel Brown, Vice Chairperson. 1, call meeting to order, roll call and invocation. Number 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. Number 3, review and adopt agenda. Number 4, review and adopt the journals. There are 4 journals: December 18, 2020, May 21st, 2021, July 16, 2021, and September 24th, 2021. And going to 5, receiving reports. A, report on FBI victim advocates, victim services and recommendation. B, report from Santee Lewis, Executive Director, Navajo Nation, Washington office on the written comments submitted to the United States Department of Justice, Office of Violence Against Women, and update the strategic plan. 6, old business, none. 7, new business, none. 8, close of meeting announcement and adjournment. Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Shada. I appreciate that. If I'm in order, can I receive a motion for the agenda?
This Delegate Brown, all motion to accept the agenda.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brown. A second, please. Committee members will need a second for the agenda.
No, I second. Hello.
Madam Chair, are you still there? Hello, Madam Chair?
Yes, I am unmuted. Thank you.
Okay,
She has Delegate So for the second. So moving forward with the agenda, I just wanted to see if there's any recognitions as we move forward with this agenda. I apologize, committee members. I'm trying to pull up the most recent agenda. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So we will call meeting to order, roll call. Oh, invitation. I apologize. If I could ask Delegate James, can you provide the committee with the invocation, please? And you might be on mute. So star 6.
Delegate Jane votes green.
Thank you, Delegate James. Can you provide the invocation for the committee?
Okay, sorry. Apologize about that. I ended up pressing the in call button instead of muting.
Okay.
Yad ita shamatane eshaha ado nana da shalkaha sunko. Kodo eya ipotizan lene gishin eya ebe yashkit dole. Koden hojon dole hon shmatka din len di kon kwa ekaya iska has ani hon potizan lene gi. Benja hanana speak dole. Leader eya ikwa ekistro Assault Prevention Subcommittee of Nabik EAT to cut out machine so a Kodo Bishmata Anime Glont at Anaja Satita Nahaj Kado Koje Adola Koje Dahon in the Niki Nabik EAT to Kodon Hisinada Han Koko Ashlatin Kaya Tasina Dor Adonda Adenabikaya beat Oko. Akot out iya ihan benigin handal ito apahonet zamit apenasya iya kodon nihit edahat ahi benasya kodon hat ayat ihiniki iya ibe hanet hokondra tempil holjishoko akot out nij ahot out hit holjistole khala hidin lenit o hayu iya kwaiti tayatik has anit iya hasin so Kodon, he hits it a bed, ain't not on it and Linny, a code Abin, so the Binet, and it out, it on him, and Lenny, it or in his whole Jishako. Hot out, Kodo, so doesn't Lenny Kitty or Art in general or Asleepy on so doesn't Lenny Kitty had this hoko. The national AAT called it or her you, hit a Lenny Kitty, has been called A. Bennett, I don't know about Chine, Sani, AKS, and the whole out, hot out, has seen so this. Cause better how you go, though you the Hasa, it's a whole reason that hot out, what is in the Niki, I've been so the Benish, and it out equal. But a national, the art conject, toss a large, yarn to large, 8 arts for home. National listen so on the snare for home and yard is the large conject in nothing dated angel who wants the large agent home. Yard national listen so on the snare home. But are they a home so doesn't the need if they have speak all the shut now me home. Yard consistent so just like all the depends on not all home. Now wait, me as in Sweden, Blond, so doesn't the need Honda de iya bench hajopa na de nido kong shiva to that out in his in the niki hajopa na de no hot a national to hojan hosting
Yeah, I appreciate that prayer and just providing those words to restore us and give us the strength to move forward on the agenda. So appreciate that deeply. So as we move forward on the agenda, I want to recognize guests and visiting officials. So I did hop onto the Zoom, and so we do have Ms. Sonia Begay from the Office of the President and Vice President, First Lady's Office. Thank you for joining us. Shadeen Yazi, Shadeja, thank you for joining us. Laurel Shepard from Victim Services of Coconino County, thank you for joining us. And Chiaj, Mr. Roy Dempsey, thank you for joining us. And we have a handful of callers, so if you are calling in using the Zoom line, please chat who you are and who you're representing for the record, and that helps Shada Shema, Teresa Woody provide all of the visiting guests who are on the committee. So I do see Tommy Sosi with the Office of the Speaker. Shiaz, if you could just rename yourself on the Zoom call, that'll help us with the record. I appreciate that. So I'm going to open it up. Is there any other individuals on the call that may not have access to the Zoom chat that need to be recognized for the record?
Good morning. This is Vernon Jackson with the Office of the Chief Prosecutor. Thank you.
Yes, ACH, thank you for joining us. You're recognized.
Good morning. Blanda Preston, Victim Specialist with the FBI out of the Flagstaff office.
Oh, yeah, Shada, thank you for joining us. And Shada, we have on the agenda a report from FBI Victim Specialist. Ms. Yvonne is not available today. Would you be able just to provide an overview on what services are provided by FBI Witness Specialists?
Yeah, I can do that. It'll probably be brief. If I have to provide any document, it's going to have to be approved by headquarters. So, you know, I don't mind doing it, but it's going to be short. And I didn't even know about this. I just got your agenda yesterday. So what was Yvonne Salivar the one that's supposed to do the presentation?
The staff that I believe are working with Yvonne, it can be a very brief discussion on just what's provided, as we have different victim advocates on the line, and we want to fill in the gap of what's provided if FBI is not the lead investigating agency, and so we're trying to build up our victim services here on Navajo Nation. So if you could provide any insight, and we could, and then if there's a deeper discussion that needs to take place, we'll provide a letter to your agency to get permission from headquarters or whatnot.
That sounds good, Madam Chair. Yes, I'd be happy to provide a brief report.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. So stand by. Anyone else on the call that needs to be recognized for the record?
Good morning. This is Ramona Antonez. I work with the Navajo Epidemiology Center of the Navajo Department of Health. I'm here to listen in and want to address the Sexual Assault Prevention Subcommittee. Good morning, honorable delegates and Madam Chair Crotty, Shadeja. Good morning, and all those on the call. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Shada, for being on the call. Anyone else who needs to be recognized for the record?
Yate Bene, Madam Chair, Decal Curley in with the Navajo Nation Washington office. I just want to let you know that I'm also on the call with my colleagues here. Glad to be on the call and hope all goes well. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Shania. I love your energy on a Friday morning. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining the call. Anyone else on the call that needs to be identified for the record?
Yate Abena, this is Savannah Joe, Victim Witness Specialist at the U.S. Attorney's Office, District of New Mexico. Thank you.
Oh, Yate. Savannah, thank you for joining us. I understand that there was some conflict in terms of the report, but if you, I appreciate, we're going to brief report from Rhonda, and really the intent is to build up services here on Navajo Nation, so I appreciate you joining the call. Okay, there was another individual for the record. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I put Delegate or Delegate Cruddy, can you hear me?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay, thank you. This is Alana Kindness. Greetings to everybody, Delegate Cruddy, Madam Chair, and council members and community members. My name is Alana Kindness. I am an independent consultant with Restoring Ancestral Lands, the Utah Coalition, the Utah Tribal Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, here to support and just be informed of the work of the council. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Ms. Kindness. We appreciate you being on the call and assisting with the drafting of some of the tribal testimony on behalf of Navajo Nation. I appreciate that. Anyone else for the record?
Good morning, Madam Chair. This is Cindy Jostley with U.S. Attorney's Office, New Mexico side.
Good morning. This is Sonia Bigay with the Navajo Nation Office of the President and Vice President. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Sonia. Thank you for joining us. If the individual from the U.S. Attorney's Office, New Mexico, can you restate your name for the record, please?
Cindy Jostley.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. I appreciate that. Thank you for joining us. Okay, it looks like a majority of who's on the call and needs to be recognized have stated their name for the record. Is there anyone else as we move on to the agenda?
Yate, this is Maxine Hillary, Deputy Executive Director of the Navajo Nation Washington Office. Good morning, everybody.
Oh, Yate Shade, Miss Hillary, I appreciate you being on the call. And I think whatever energy you have at that Washington office, you need to send it over here to Window Rock. I appreciate all the energy. It's wonderful to hear from you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else for the record?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Leonard Sandoval, and I'm with Victim Witness Services. I'm the Tuba City Advocate alongside Laurel Shepard. I'm here to listen in. Thank you.
Thank you, Siaj, for joining the call.
Good morning. This is Robert Willie from the Office of the Controller.
Oh, Yate, thank you, Mr. Willie, for joining the call. I appreciate the Office of the Controller participating in this important discussion. Okay, last call. Anyone else who needs to be recognized for the record? Chiaj Roy Dempsey, did you want to introduce yourself for the record? I do see you're on the call, but we would need to identify what program or what entity you're calling on behalf of. Thank you. Okay, it's *6 to get off of mute, but I appreciate everyone being on the call. So we'll move on to reviewing and adopting the agenda. I'm sorry, I kind of.
Madam Chair, we already did the agenda, so there was a motion by Honorable Nathaniel Brown and second by Eugene, so that's where you left off. Okay?
Thank you. Do we need to move to the vote? Sorry.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I apologize, committee members. If we could, are there any amendments or deletions to the agenda? If not, we can move on to the vote. Hearing none, we'll move on to the vote. Shadow Ms. Woody, can you provide a roll call vote, please? Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Oh. Yes, Delegate So.
Okay.
A few days or weeks or months ago, I had requested in the regards of investigation that has been long overdue in regards to maybe 10, 20, 30 years. I asked if we can get a record of it and the status of those that are unsolved. I feel that we might have to come back and ask for it to whoever had those records. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiaj. So so today we'll be receiving a brief report from the FBI victim advocate. If the case was a murder or a homicide, it's our federal partners who investigate with our criminal investigators. We could then bring that up at the report, and we are going to have a follow-up, a more in-depth report from our FBI victim advocates, or I'm sorry, victim specialists at Navajo. So your questions can be asked. Your questions can be asked at this report, and they'll provide additional information at the next meeting. Delegate So.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Delegate So, and I appreciate that recommendation and is why we added them to the report. Are there any other questions before we move to the vote? Not hearing any. Teresa, if you can, or Ms. Woody, if you could provide the roll call vote. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, to vote for the agenda. Madam Chair, how do you, oh, you don't vote, I'm sorry. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes in favor. Yeah.
Okay. And Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Eugene So, how do you vote?
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Back to Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Madam Chair, 2 members voting affirmative and 1 not voting. So your vote is 201.
Delegate James votes green. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate James votes green, so 301, the vote.
Thank you, Shada. Ms. Woody, I appreciate you assisting the committee with the vote. So moving forward, committee members will move on to reviewing and adopting the journal. Ms. Spencer, can you provide some background to the committee members and when this was sent out for their review? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. This journals were sent yesterday to the members at 10:28, and there are 4 journals: December 18, 2020, May 21st, 2021, July 16, 2021, and September 24th, 2021. And it was sent by the recorder, Ms. Sherelle Luto. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Shada. Ms. Spencer, committee members, are there any questions? Or, I'm sorry, if I could receive a motion?
This is Delegate Brown. I'll motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brown. A second? Committee members, if you could receive a second on reviewing and adopting the journals, you may have to press *6. We do have Vice Chair Brown who made the motion, so now need a second.
The case.
I appreciate it. Yeah, Delegate. So for the second, are there any questions or recommendations, committee members, on the journal? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote. Shada, Ms. Whitty, can you provide the roll call vote? Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, the vote for the journals. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
I vote in favor. Yeah.
Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Eugene So, how do you vote? Going back to Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Eugene So, how do you vote?
So.
Honorable Eugene So votes green. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote?
Delegate James votes green. Thank you.
Delegate James votes green. Madam Chair, you have 3 members voting affirmative for the journals. So 3-0-1 is the vote.
Yeah, Shada, thank you for helping the committee with that vote. Moving on, we'll go to receiving reports. Report on FBI victim, and it should say victim specialist. I appreciate that that correction on victim services and recommendations. If I could receive a motion from committee members to hear this report.
Motion, Delegate James.
Thank you, Delegate James. A second, please.
This is Delegate Brown. I'll second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brown seconds. We'll move forward with the report. I did hear Ms. Blanda Preston on the line, and I will recognize Ms. Savannah Joe. If you could just provide a brief overview of what services are provided to our victims and survivors of violence. And again, we will, from this conversation, we'll recommend an additional report. And as you heard from Delegate Eugene, so his question regarding what happens to these cold cases where there's been a case from 20, 25 years ago without any type of follow-up. What could be some of the recommendations? And I appreciate that Mr. Vernon Jackson is on the call. because this will help us in our work when it comes to either understanding the declinations or and our other victim service providers like Ms. Shepherd, so that we can build up our victim services here on Navajo Nation. Thank you. Ms. Preston and Ms. Joe.
Hello, Shay Blanda Preston, FBI victim specialist for 16 years. I used to be at the Gallup FBI office. I am now at Flagstaff FBI. Don't mention it, can't aning my excuse me, Bashichin is a son of eight that should say, put it in eight that should not let it without a son in Schlendo, Lebesh Hakie, then Igisi Nasha. The FBI's role in victim assistance is we go by the Attorney General guideline that was established in 2011, and it requires the FBI employees to provide victims of federal crime with information and assistance. That's when our Victim Service Division was established, and there were, I think we might have about close to 200 victim specialists throughout the United States. There was 130 that serve Native American communities. So providing information assistance to victims, it's been very helpful in in investigation, and this kind of allows the victims to cooperate and be able to go through the investigative process. So I am a victim specialist, and when I take a case, it's during my job is during the investigation that I work with the victims, and we have our partners on the line from the U.S. Attorney. When the case is indicted, there's an arrest made, we turn over the case to them, and they start serving the victims. So myself, during the investigation phase, I back off at that time and let our partners, U.S. attorneys, take over, victim specialists with U.S. attorneys take over. So during the investigation, our role as a victim specialist during the investigation is that we provide on-scene assistance. When we are on call 24/7. Yeah, I can get a call for a homicide, federal crimes. I can get called. I can help out, by going out to the scene and having contact with the family. So I do my assessment and I kind of triage victims' needs at that time. My job is also referring crisis intervention, referring victims for assistance with counseling. If there's a shelter in a DV or case where the victims looking for a place to go, I help out with identifying, a shelter. Any medical services that's needed at that point. I accompany the agents, if I'm needed out at the crime scene, to support, the interviews, just be there, ongoing support to the victims in the case. My job is also to deliver death notification. On Navajo Nation, I've only done maybe 2 death notification. The reason why is that our local law enforcement has already have notified the family, so I oftentimes don't get to do that, but or the social media, all that really comes into play, so they're already aware of what's happened as something that, they already know. So, very few death notifications that I've done with an agent. One of the big things that I do all the time is coordinating forensic interviews and sexual assault examinations. Just to kind of let you know that this month, for the month of October, I've set up 5, 6, about 8 forensic interviews, and this is for children. So that, takes a lot of our caseload is child sexual abuse from Navajo Nation. They refer to us, and, as a victim specialist, I want to make sure that we serve these victims right away, and that would be through the interviews, exam. And we have our own forensic interviewers. We call them CAFI, and they come down to do interviews for us. If they are not available, then we go with the local child advocacy centers. The one I utilize is the Chase Safe Child Center here in Flagstaff. And then I believe there's some other advocacy center in Gallup and in Farmington, that's closer to Navajo. So they help us in doing the interviews, and then we make a determination at that point, is FBI is going to continue the investigation, or do we give it back to the tribe to be the lead? Or, we can also determine if both, can just help each other, get this to the U.S. Attorney's Office for a decision on what they're going to do, whether they're going to prosecute or, give it back to the tribe. The other thing, as a victim specialist, you could kind of act like a liaison between the victim and the FBI throughout the course of the investigation. You have to explain a lot of the criminal justice system, the investigation process, the forensic, identification process. Those are some things I get calls all the time for updates. My job is to provide update to the victims and the family. And then there's a lot of coordinating efforts working with other professionals. I do refer a lot of cases to the victim compensation program. They have fundings. Victims have to apply for, fill out an application, and then victim comp is the one that takes it to the board and makes a decision on whether they're going to fund the counseling, fee, counseling services. And there's other things, they reimburse for ceremony, expense for ceremonial burial assistance, but they have to fill out the application. So that's where Victim Compensation of Arizona comes in. And I work closely with Coconino County. They are in Flagstaff, and I know they've been awesome. They're expanding throughout Navajo Nation. I'm really excited. We do need advocates out in the community. So that's something that's going on or happening right now, and I'm really glad that's taking place so that we could serve our victims right away. The other, partners we have is, I mentioned earlier, are the victims specialist, the U.S. Attorney's Office. When the case is accepted at the U.S. Attorney's Office, they take over, and I think I can have one of the specialists, talk about what they do after indictment and arrest. I think we're just there for the victims. We make them feel, part of the case. We let them know that, hear their needs, and then just be with them, be them as a support. So that's pretty much what we do as a victim specialist. I think that's all I have. Maybe I could have my partner from the U.S. Attorney take over.
Thank you, Ms. Preston. Ms. Joe, were you able just to provide a brief overview of the type of services you provide, or was that going to be Cindy?
Good morning. This is Savannah Joe. Good morning, everybody. I would like to know if my colleague Cindy Josley would like to speak to services that we do provide, or would she like me to speak on behalf of our victim witness unit?
Yep, good morning. She is Cindy Josley in Chicago. I've been with U.S. Attorney for about 10 years now. Ashihin Slant de Bashin, Kia Anne de Shinale. What it's in it as it say.
Oh,
this
Okay, I'm sorry, Miss Cindy, if you could pause a moment. Staff, I'm hearing a lot of background noise. If we could, if everyone on the line can mute your call.
Did you still need this one? Okay.
So if your number, the last 471, please mute your line. Thank you, Miss Cindy, if you can continue, I apologize for that.
Okay, so the victims between the Lishek Ashishi, but the Snahangir Chinyajda, Edota, has Twisani, does Lingita, major crime, there's no day, Yoje, a call, what between the Listo, not so Sintiak, and Dahaki, a epic echo between the Lish. Arohit Ashishi between the week, Sat Nedo did at a Sabalagana do did at a court, Satabat, Katahuilansi store. Aro, we also can transport them to court. If they have no transportation, we have to make plans with our victims to take them to court, to help them through the court process, to explain what is happening in the court every step of the way until the defendant gets sentenced. Although we work with certain resources, counseling services in our areas, our counselors or therapy for children. Of course, I sit at the Gallup FBI office. That's where my office is. Our main office is in Albuquerque, but the U.S. Attorney's Office had a unique situation, and that's where I came in. And I'm the only one out of the U.S. Attorney's Office that's out at the FBI office in Gallup. So I get to work with the advocates locally from the Gallup office. Otto, when we pick up a case, when a case is given to us and we start working with them, we explain however they're comfortable. Sometimes when it's children's cases, those are very difficult, especially for a lot of them are single parents, single mothers. So those are very difficult cases, and sometimes counseling is very hard to find for these victims that have been assaulted. And a lot of them are family members that have been assaulted, either a grandchild or someone in the close vicinity in their housing area. So when we all work with these attorneys, the prosecutors that are prosecuting these cases, we're the middle people, victim witness specialists, we're the middle people between the prosecutor and then different resources, or sometimes even the FBI and criminal investigations or Navajo police. Just because our prosecutors are very busy in court, we try to help our prosecutors explain to resources what and where we are in our case when we are prosecuting these cases. So just like what Blanda said, we do go hand in hand with them, the victim specialists from FBI. When they finish a case, they introduce the victims to us and we take it on from there. So victim specialists with FBI, they do a lot of the legwork for us, meaning they already have referred some of these children to counseling therapy. So we just kind of follow along with what they're doing and where they're at in their counseling program. So that's mainly what our victim specialists do in our office.
Oh, Cindy, I apologize, but I'm struggling to say your last name. How do you say it?
Jocelyn. So my husband was part Hopi, so that's where that name comes from. That's probably why it's difficult to say. It's Jocelyn.
Okay, Jocelyn. Thank you. My name is also difficult, Crotty. So I just tell the elders, you could call me like Crotty Kid, Crotty Cat. So thank you for that. Thank you, Ms. Jocelyn, for that report. And I wanted to ask, and I'll open it up to Ms. Joe. Did you want to add any additional information?
Let's see, Cindy covered everything beautifully, and I did not expect any less. So I wanted to make sure I had her speak on behalf of our unit because she is certainly a veteran in our office. I believe the only couple of things I would stress is that, or echo, is that we operate under the AG guidelines, as well as making sure that we are in compliance with the CVRA. In addition to that, that means that the services that we would provide in general would be providing notification to victims about public court proceedings, such as indictments, arraignments, etc., and providing information to victims about the victim notification system and letting them know what that looks like and how to connect. In addition to that, receiving those letters from the BNS Center. And let's see, of course, informing them of their rights and under the federal law. In addition to that, let's see, Cindy already covered referring victims to Crime Victims Reparation Commission. And in addition to that, notifying subpoenaed witnesses of changes in court dates and times. And I think I would also like to cover or expand that to when a person is sentenced to BOP, there is that, after, let me backtrack for a second. After charges are filed and everybody goes through that whole process of the criminal justice system, once a plea agreement is entered, assuming a plea agreement is entered, or a case resolved by trial, whatever it is, typically stressing to the families or victims that this is a very lengthy process. It's not going to be a 60-minute process like you see on Law and Order SVU. That the reality is that when a case comes through our office, it's going to take about a year, 2 years, or 3 years. It depends on the type of case it is. But in addition to that, what investigative agencies have already done or what they haven't done at that point. And certainly with the current circumstance with COVID, a lot of our cases have been moving at in a sense, not all cases, but at a snail's pace out of an abundance of caution in pushing these cases forward and having our court appearances in person or on a virtual platform, and helping our families navigate through that system or connect them with resources or services to connect to those hearings on our external public website, or asking the courtroom deputy to open up a phone line so that families are able to connect to these hearings from the safety and comfort of their own home. And if they're not able to connect, then what we have been doing is thinking creatively outside of that box. That would mean calling into the external phone number with the unique PIN and ID, and then calling the victim or the victim's family member, and essentially just adding them to the call, or calling them and placing our phone to the laptop so they're able to still connect and listen in on the hearing. And in addition to that, letting them know, back to my point, of the reality of how long this case takes, assuming again that a case resolved in a plea, or if it resolves via trial, that the sentencing date is going to be, about 75 days or so after that guilty plea is entered, or if the jury finds that person guilty of certain offenses. And in addition to that, let's see, the sentencing is very huge. And sometimes families they don't have transport to be there. And as Cindy stated, if we're given enough notice or if we're aware of the family dynamics and services that they may not have or resources, then we're able to transport them or work with our partners to help with transportation. In addition to that, after a person is sentenced, we're notified of where that person is sentenced. So you've got different partners that come in at key stages of this criminal justice process. It's not just investigative agencies and victim specialists, whether they're from BIA, tribal, or NGOs, then we're able to work with other partners to help us provide services to that victim. And in addition to that, when they're walking through our system or going through our system, they also meet U.S. probation officers that get in touch with them regarding the pre-sentence report. And that is, in a nutshell, it's gathering information that will be submitted to the judge prior to sentencing. And what's very important about that is that the U.S. probation officer reaches out to the family or the victim, assuming it's not a homicide case, reaching out to the family and saying, hey, we would like to we're going to send you some paperwork and some forms, and we would like you to, if you want to, submit a victim impact statement. The victim impact statement is so imperative in capturing that truth and capturing that experience that the family is going through, or what really capturing their truth in a sense of how did this crime affect you? How did this crime impact your family? How did it play, or, how did it play out in your family? Did it harm you spiritually, mentally, physically, financially, etc.? So it's important for a victim to participate in that victim impact statement. Again, it's not mandated, but I certainly cannot advocate the importance of that and having families write a victim impact statement and submit it. And of course, if they want to provide that victim impact statement at the sentencing hearing. And I know that's very hard to do, but certainly it paints that truth that they're feeling for the judge and for everyone else in that courtroom. And in addition to that, that victim can submit their restitution information. That could be funeral costs that they may have had to pay out of pocket, or other costs that they have suffered as a result of this crime. So that's another person that they're, introduced to along this criminal justice system. And then after sentencing, they're going to be contacted by BOP, assuming that person was sentenced to a BOP, say in Colorado, and they're notified by BOP individuals of the status of this individual, and then when this person is going to be released from that Bureau of Prisons. And in addition to that, after a person is released from prison, usually they are sent to a halfway house for a certain amount of time. That could be about 6 months, so that they reintegrate back into society. And then sometimes, it doesn't happen all of the time, but there have been situations where an individual has absconded from a halfway house within a day, 2 weeks, when they're at that facility. So then we notify the victims. And it's not just our office. We work with our federal partners, tribal partners, or other partners on the ground to make sure that this victim is notified that this person absconded. Then there's a warrant out for this individual. So we have U.S. Marshals who come back into the picture and with other partners. So there's just so much that happens in the background that I think a lot of people don't know because they're not in the system, or the people that do know, they're directly tied to the system because they are either a victim of crime, or they are a family member to that victim, or they're the defendant's family member. So there's just a lot that happens in the background that's very important, I think, for just educational purposes. And certainly, if you would like to further discuss that, and I hope I did not put everybody to sleep, but certainly we are open to have that conversation, and I would like my supervisor to be part of that conversation, because she certainly has a wealth of information, and of course, including our prosecutors in our office. I could talk all day about this, but I certainly, again, I don't want to take much more of your time and everybody.
Thank you, Ms. Joe. I appreciate that, Shadeja. I do want to just pause and state that we appreciate the feedback from the FBI witness specialist and the AUSA. I believe it's also witness specialist. Some clarification that I need to make from some of our comments from our community members who are listening. These are advocates, or I'm sorry, specialists, if FBI is investigating the case, and then if AUSA takes the case. Now, what we're seeing on Navajo Nation as we review some of these cases and community members discuss the challenges of getting some type of justice from the criminal justice system is how can Navajo Nation provide similar services if Navajo Nation is either the lead investigating agency or if it's being prosecuted in Navajo courts, or if FBI does not, and this would be a follow-up question, and Ms. Preston, just let me know if we need to have a follow-up, well, we'll need to have a follow-up discussion on how are the cases that are not recommended to AUSA, what does that look like, and who's notified? And then for our specialists who are with AUSA, how, or is there room where we could have conversations as we build up the victim services program with Navajo prosecutors? So it's taken us a few years to build up that program, but we want to make sure that we're providing similar services for our families who are dealing within our own Navajo criminal justice system. So that was a lot of questions. I'm going to pause there, think about it, but I am going to move back to the committee. Committee members, are there any questions?
Madam Chair, this is Cindy Jostley.
Yes, Ms. Jostley.
I just wanted to add, when this pandemic started, when this COVID-19 started, we were all sent home and were told to set up in our own homes our computers, our cell phones, and things that we could try to work with from our homes. I was, personally speaking for myself, I was very happy when I heard that there was going to be broadband services, not just for the schools, but for our victims, so that we could connect with them through internet, because that's how we were doing our court services, was through Zoom calls, or either by phone, because a lot of our Navajo families are still not able to get on the internet. So that made it a lot easier for some of us. Our work was a lot easier in that way when we were told some of our families were going to get internet services. And then the free cell services through NTUA. Some of those really helped. They may not know that, but some of us were very appreciative of that. Because, like I said, a lot of our families that we work with live in rural areas, especially up north. Like I cover the eastern part of Navajo Nation, and then the Zuni Reservation. That's my coverage area. So when we have no cell service, or when we have no internet services, that's when we use our own. That's assigned to us, our own computers, our own internet services from our homes, and then our phone. So when Savannah talked about the VNS system, that's our victim notification system, where it generates letters to let our victims know that there's a court hearing on this day or this person has been arrested. So a lot of our communication kind of lacked when this pandemic started, but somehow we caught on and we knew how to connect with our victims. I just wanted to bring that out there.
Thank you, Ms. Jocelyn. I appreciate that update. And as we have these broadband conversations, our effort here for Navajo Nation leadership is to provide broadband to every section of the Navajo Nation, knowing that our community and relatives who live in rural areas are targeted and need to have that service for public safety, health, and now knowing that we can maximize our criminal justice system. So thank you for providing that information. Committee members, are there any questions that you have for our victim specialist? Okay, what I would like to ask Ms. Jocelyn, have you been able to work, or did you know that Navajo Nation, our Office of the Prosecutor, developed a victim advocate program? And is there any type of communication or cross-training that we could provide to help support that newly established unit?
Madam Chair, I was informed that there would be some victim advocates that would be hired through Navajo Nation that we could work with, when there's a crime here on the Navajo Nation. And we were told that we would be invited to help train those victim advocates. And that's the last we heard. That would be so nice to work with Navajo Nation victims. Ooh. And then, however, we have, sometimes our cases are not just with FBI. I just wanted to let you know that, the members that are listening as well. Sometimes we directly work with criminal investigators, straight just criminal investigators, and those be our case agents on our cases. And so that's what we've been told, that there would be victim advocates, but I haven't seen a victim advocate out in my area yet.
So what we will do, and as I have a follow-up red flag, and those on the call, is let's coordinate a meeting as an update what victim services are provided through the program. So Department of Social Services has a very small group of advocates who assist, but the Office of the Prosecutor has developed and hired victim services for the Office of the Prosecutor, and then Utah Navajo Health Systems and Coconino County with Sexual Assault Services, they're developing a comprehensive approach to victim services on Navajo Nation. So Mr. Sosi, being on the call for Office of the Speaker, I'll need your assistance and through recommendations from this committee as a follow-up so that we could have a conversation about who's providing services on Navajo Nation and how we can support cross-training and communication. And Shadeja, Sonia Begay, and let me know how your office with the Office of the President, Vice President want to be involved and engaged in this conversation. So from my notes, Ms. Jocelyn, I just want to let you know that there's victim advocates in every one of our prosecutor's office across Navajo Nation. They're being funded through 2018 grant from the Office of Victims of Crime Tribal Set-Aside. And so they are funded for at least, I believe, the next 2 years. And so we want to help support that program and as we build up victim services. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention for all of those on the call and in our collective work to provide services. So I always say, you know, sometimes people say, well, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. And I just see that in our healing journey, that when a crisis occurs, there has been victimization, targeting. We hope to be with them as they heal and become survivors, and for all of us then to be restored to the warriors that we are. So that's just the way I use the verbiage, and I know as others are more progressive on the call might have trouble when saying victim services, but it is ingrained in so many of our grants and position titles that we could collectively work together on how we can offer more empowering terms for all of those who are challenged. Let's see. I did have another question. So what are the recommendations? And if you feel at this time, what can the nation do and as leadership and this subcommittee do in working with our programs and in our oversight? And most importantly, as we're dealing with what you consider ARPA, but we have Navajo Financial Recovery Fund, we're looking at a public safety victim services fund. And so what are some of the services that we need to provide in your experience that would be helpful? I did write down child advocacy centers, and we are working with Child Haven out of Farmington to develop a child advocacy center in Shiprock and Crown Point area. And we're working with our criminal investigators on developing or strengthening our multidisciplinary teams. But in your opinion, what could be some recommendations in your experience that could be helpful for our families who suffer through violence?
Madam Chair, this is Blanda Preston. My recommendation is I really would like to see a victim services division with Navajo Nation. I think that it's a big nation, and yes, we get all of the major crimes, but from my experience is that, you know, when I get calls 3 or 4 cases a week, so out of that 3 or 4, we would want the nation to take it on. Maybe let's say I got 4, 2 may not meet the federal statute, so it goes back to the tribe, and that's where the victim advocates out in the community would take it on. I would refer them back to the victim advocate in the community and make sure, you know, they start working with the family. And the ones that go to U.S. Attorney, which is always very low, those cases would go to the U.S. Attorney's Victim Witness Services. The other thing I want to clarify, too, is FBI title is Victim Specialist. So our job is, you know, when the agent identifies a victim in their case, those are the victims that we would work with. At the U.S. Attorney, when the case goes over to U.S. Attorney, the advocates or the specialist there works, their title is Victim Witness Specialist. So they work with the witness. So that's kind of, you know, sometimes we will help, you know, set up interviews with the victims, but majority of our duties is directly with the victims, the new victims that are identified. So, you know, I really feel like the nation's going in the right direction. And maybe a victim services division would be awesome. I've had experience of, you know, social services having victim advocates, and they always phase out or they're given other responsibilities. So it was always hard for them to, you know, for me to work with them to get them to work with the victims because they're added because of other added responsibilities that they have. So I you know, thank you guys. You guys are going in the right direction, but victim service division with the nation would be that would be awesome.
Thank you, Ms. Preston. I appreciate those recommendations. And so if I could ask Ms. Shepard with Coconino County Victim Services, if you could provide some insight on how we could work with our federal partners as we develop this victim services program. Thank you.
Yeah, Dante, thank you for the invitation to speak. Shea na kaidne enshna ishni bashes chin do tsadashkishin idshche do ki ani idashnale. Twinest is de na nishish do kode to kislane de victim witness services bahosna. So as we move into this new partnership that you had addressed earlier on, Shade, I wanted to elaborate on some of the work that we have already done in the communities that involve the nation and our people. Early on, when we came to Tuba City as a satellite office, a branch off the main victim witness services here in Flagstaff, one of the things that we have immediately noticed is the high rate of child sexual assaults and just the rate of sexual assaults on the nation. And one of the things through the work here the past 18 months of being out there and then now expanding services in January, one of the things I'd like to highlight is finding out each and every one of the advocate scope of work. We had a
point of order. This is Delegate James.
Okay. That's one of the things that
point of order, Delegate James.
Masane, I apologize for interrupting you. But I did submit in our chat in regards to the last report. Not the Washington office. I had questions in regards to the last report, but I'll just go ahead and email them. That way we can move.
Yes, thank you, Delegate James. We are still on that report regarding victim services. And it is open to the committee if you have any questions, Delegate James.
Okay, go. Shiyaja, go ahead and I'll just go ahead and have her continue with her report.
Yes, thank you, Delegate James. And so we do not have a written report for report 1 from our FBI witness specialist, but we will have a follow-up in-depth conversation with some additional information to provide to the committee. Thank you, Delegate James, for your point of order. So, Ms. Shepard, if you can continue, and then we'll open it up back to committee members to ask questions on the report. Thank you.
Oops, thank you. I was on mute again. So I guess introducing the program first before we move into the satellite offices. Flagstaff Victim Witness Services is in Coconino County, and our main office is right downtown Flagstaff, next to the post office. Through the years, they've been providing services to even a lot of the people from our nation as they are a border town. But we've been in operation for about 37 years now. And through the years, providing inclusion to the outer lying areas of our community was one of our main things. So through that process, we have developed our satellite offices, and they are now located in Williams, Grand Canyon, Page, and most recently Tuba City. So I was tasked about 18 months ago to start that process in Tuba City, and some of the big highlights that have come up through the last year and a half was access to some of these resources. And when I say that is what is out there, one of the things that I strongly would recommend is access to therapy, access to crisis counselors. That is one service that we have utilized highly, as we have a crisis counselor on staff. Her name is Dr. Val, and she is usually able, just based off of a text message, I can call her and say, hey, Dr. Val, I have somebody that really needs to talk to you. And she usually is able to take the call or have a response to the individual within 24 to 48 hours, and then scheduling sessions after that. So that's one thing that we have utilized heavily in that area as well. And we're so grateful to our partners and our funders with the county that have allowed us to serve others, even if they do not have an address or they do not live on within Coconino boundaries. They have recognized the uniqueness of our reservation and know that people come to Tuba City for a lot of things. We have one of the few grocery stores in the nation. We have a hospital, and some of these service central locations are where people go for services. So we have been servicing people on the Navajo Nation since we started, just with that recognition of it. So we have started to tailor services to the needs of the community. And that is one thing that I strongly suggest, is having that access to therapists, to counselors, to be able to chat. And then we unfortunately have a high rate of child sexual assaults, and that's a lot of our cases lately. And so that's when our therapist very much comes into play, and we have recognized that. So we have, even through the pandemic, we have not stopped seeing individuals in person or seeing individuals in crisis. So our program is home to providing services to all victims of crime, regardless of if they decide to report or not, if they decide to work with law enforcement or not. And even a self-referral is how we are taking individuals, and we will work with individuals for as long as they choose to. And safety planning, especially on the nation, has become something that we really, really stress and talk about with our clients, as it's a unique situation. We've been able to extract some families out of very remote locations, and a lot of our services and funding goes into, and also this is another thing, council, if you have monies or thinking about planning on money, is having a fund where it can be used for some of those crisis needs. So we are fortunate to have some funding to be able to provide hotels, because especially in Tuba and the surrounding areas, we don't have a shelter nearby. I think we're very limited on those resources. And when something happens late at night and somebody ends up in the hospital, or they have to be removed from their home, what we have been doing is putting them up in hotels and then coming back in the morning after they've had a meal and some time to rest. We've been sent, then we connect them with shelters and resources from there. So that's one of the main things. But as we move forward into the Navajo Nation, we're open to the conversations of how we need to tailor services. So our program is able to help with some of those immediate crisis needs, and those have been hotels, sometimes food, and especially with our sexual assault victims, it is clothing. So our services is really tailored to the individual needs of those people we're helping. And our main office has been able to really kind of tailor the needs for individuals through this pandemic. So we have support groups that are also available virtually and also in person. So we are happy to chat. And really, as we have gone into the community, one of the things that I have struggled with in my area in Tuba City is office space. I'm meeting clients and doing order of protections in the police department parking lot. So things like that. So thinking about office space and looking at your justice, maybe taking a look back at your justice centers and actually making it accessible to people who need them and providing those services. And then we very much recognize that there are other advocates out there. And we welcome a conversation. Who else is out there? Who else is on our team? As service providers, we really cannot do this alone. And it's really important to identify who else is on your team, who else is fighting that fight to help people, to get people the things they need to make sure people are safe. And so we welcome a conversation and really talking about what each other's scope of work is. We here are very fortunate that we can see anybody that even self-identifies as a victim. And and what we can and can't do. We have a very large area where we're able to sometimes help with things that a lot of other programs might not be able to. And we've bought in food for people and groceries for a whole family. So things like that. So think about that funding as council leaders, advocate for that, that ability for advocates to provide that for families that are in need. And then identifying who is out there is one of the other big things that I've been trying to do, and what your scope of work is. We're very excited that the prosecutor's office is home to 7 advocates, and we really would love to meet them and find out what their work is. And we're very fortunate that Ms. Preston we have a good working relationship with her office and her program there through the years. So, and then also the AUSA that serves Tuba City. But we'd like to establish those type of good working relationships as we move forward. My email is in the chat. We are open to talking and having conversations about what we can and can't do. So in conscious and time, reach out and let us know how we're able to help and what we can do to fill in a lot of those gaps. And we have jumped the gun a little bit. Leo is also in Tuba City as an advocate, and we have hired somebody out of Delcon. So we're here, we're transporting, we're seeing people in person, we're going to people's houses when they need help with hearings or even being a physical support there. So we are out there and we're seeing people. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Thank you, Khadija. I appreciate that. I did see in the chat line, Delegate James did present his question. And right before we go to Delegate James, I did want to give some time to our acting chief prosecutor Vernon Jackson, because we are leaning on his office to help in this coordination of victim services. But Office of the Speaker has provided a lot of support, and so we'll continue to coordinate these calls and these meetings. But Shiaj, Mr. Jackson, did you want to provide some insight? And then I'm going to move on to Delegate James's question.
Yes, good morning, Honorable Amber Crotty. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, we could hear you, Shiaj.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll make this quick and just say that I'm encouraged to hear all of these efforts to sort of bring in the survivor/victim considerations. I will make contact with the lead person on our side, on the prosecutor side, to make contact with Ms. Josley and also this person who just did the presentation for the Tuba City area. I'll make that contact. I'll make sure that there's sort of a link that happens there to ensure that we better coordinate a lot of these cases as they are developing. So I make a commitment to do that. So thank you very much for your presentations this morning. They're very helpful. Again, my name is Vernon Jackson. I'm the acting chief prosecutor for the Navajo Nation. I oversee all of the victim advocates who are embedded within the prosecutor's office across the Navajo Nation. So that's all I'll say at this time. Thank you, Honorable Amber Crotty.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Shiaj. So I want to move over to Delegate Vince James. You had a question in the chat, Shiaj. Did you want to ask your question to our presenters? Delegate James might be having some technical issues. It is *6. If not, I'll read his question. And his question was, how do you work with child care centers at Kerrigan, Little Miss Muffet, and Howan Hojone? Presenters, do you have any insight on that question for Delegate James, or do you have any recommendations in terms of how you provide services while working with those child care centers? Thank you.
Matt, this is Laurel. I am not familiar with them, but I have reached out in regards to outreach and emails. So if there's any way we can provide support to any of those, we are open to having those conversations, especially to tailor services to our Khachine. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. Shadija? Yes.
Madam Chair, Hogan, Hojoni, I need, sounds like those placements are like near the Gallup office of the FBI. Hogan is familiar to me because social services, I believe, places children there. So that we don't work with them, but I know social services are the ones that place children because we work closely with CPS when there's a need for, having kids removed out of the home. So those are alternative placement that they utilize.
Hi, Gosheen, thank you for that clarification. Ms. Jocelyn, did you want to provide any insight as you have experience working at the Gallup office?
I don't work directly with those shelters for children. We too go through the social workers. Not unless our prosecutor needs direct contact with, say, a witness, say like something happened in those facilities, that would be the only way that we would be in contact with them. And then our area is very unique because we go through Arizona and then back to New Mexico again to like Crystal area up in that area. So we work sometimes in the Window Rock and Fort Defiance area. And then like somebody had mentioned the multidisciplinary team. A lot of those chairs are empty when we have our multidisciplinary team meetings. And that is very good information for law enforcement, prosecutor, like the Navajo Nation prosecutor. My office, I represent my office, and then FBI has a representative. So that's where a lot of collaborative information could be shared on a case to help a victim in a case. Sometimes we do declinations, and so social workers are having a hard time working with local resources. That's what I know from our multidisciplinary team.
Oh, yeah, thank you for bringing up the multidiscipline discipline teams. It has been my experience that there is a concern that Navajo Nation programs like Department of Social Services, not the advocates, but the CPS or family services are not participating consistently. And so we do, and it's interesting, I always get invited to other MDT meetings that are off the nation. So like for Gallup, Hummingbird, I'm invited. But when it comes to Navajo Nation, that has been more of a challenge. And it's gone to the point where at one point our Department of Social Services called upon our Department of Justice to ask that I not attend the meetings, understanding that there was confidentiality. What I was just trying to do is make sure that these meetings and accountabilities were moving forward. So we're going to make that one of our heavy lifts to make sure that MDTs are being conducted across the nation when they're being convened, and who actually is in attendance and participating for accountability purposes. So thank you for that recommendation. Delegate James, I did see your response in the chat. Thank you. And we'll continue to have the discussion in terms of understanding how victim services are provided. Something that we could do for our next meeting when we talk about the child care system is we can request for social services, either CPS or family services, to provide a report on child sex crimes, and in coordination with possibly our Department of Diné Education as they have their scan reports that suspect of child abuse and neglect, and we could add in our Head Start. So, Miss Lorene, if you could add that as in our discussion for our next work group meeting to invite social services and Department of Diné Education to provide additional information when it comes to child sex cases on Navajo and how they're being reported and how they move forward. Okay, thank you. Committee members, are there any other questions
This is Delegate James.
Regarding Delegate James? Yes, we could hear you, Tiaj.
So here Nana Shamasan Ada Shana Win Agi Ado Ada Hilda Hosna Egi the Binyaba na dish kidiki a D quit out on a hot it did out a t-shirt del hat neko Ado and the lady ya iga edo da salon linen also swedish iho height out la a be what the na ho inta a ad in also linen han daily a quaggy AHA bakaha isn't ha laid out a quaggy ben he not sauce linen had the do be the question on nilka a quaggy that's it special to the codot episilhan snilty ko had egita kodo at but had the shahiki partners na looking that the chief look until it's it hoye to ako heda kodo na gahigi edo da did nebekaya hahotso did out a t-shirt del do and the shal chin and lini hollow edo da a masan and nale a sale da and sego did out a man linigi question edo da jaiki question nihidini do what out height out ya bisnachnesh do height out hoden na ho inta ade ya hatolni do ya hatol khalto le ya hatol esto le di quite quite out actually di beniya di quite an hania jo kodat a higi bahna atish kito kaha instance beniya what an adel kito le a la
Delegate James, Dave Blanda, addition.
Ms. Preston, I'm sorry, just to keep order of the committee, and I was on pause or I was on mute. Thank you, Delegate James. I'll move forward. Ms. Preston, did you want to answer the question? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. What the FBI ya sata ahadina sata hotena so it's Navajo Police Department atano nihi hista hosnet danisa ado bikedo she ni yego di hadne di kibiti kota lay criminal investigation ajelsa nal sos bail sos ado undan hitch nal sos in hitch da yili sata din na sata ani to hata sata tha di dan des unda pata hoti tsi ni hot aisha I just want to say that these referral reports are often delayed, and some, there's reports that we get right away. The process with Navajo Nation, they let the public know, is that the report has to go to Navajo Nation Police Department. They have to be the first responder, and there's got to be a report number for CI to get involved. So the report, after a police officer responds, and if you see that there's a major crime, all child sexual abuse cases, they have to call the on-call CI, or they give them the report. And then that report comes to our office, and then we start working on the forensic services, forensic interviews. So it comes to our office. The challenge there is when I do set up these forensic interviews, oftentimes it's just the agent, myself. We don't get the law enforcement there from Navajo Nation or criminal investigation. So because a lot of the cases, they do go back to the tribe to be filed, to take care of at the tribal level, but we oftentimes don't have the CIs there to watch the interviews. I believe they just rely on the agent to give them the report, because that's kind of what I see. They'll ask for the interview and report. And at all these interviews we do, we always get an extra copy of the CD, and we give it back to the tribe. So, if you're a victim advocate and you're out in the community a lot too, you get reports. People make reports to you directly. And when I come across a family that makes a report that I don't know about, I will notify the on-call agent, and I will also notify the on-call criminal investigator for that district, so they are aware of it. And I always encourage the family to make a report to the local PD. And sometimes they do need assistance or support to do that, so we offer those services. And once the report's made, then if I'm already aware of it, then I would just, go right into what service needs to be, be taken care of. But there are cases we get really late. And by the time I make contact with the family, they don't want law enforcement involved because they will say that, God, this was the report we made last year. So we do get that. So, these reports that are made, especially federal crimes, we do need to get those right away so we could get the ball rolling and get the services and what evidence, the collection that we need to do to make it a good case. Thank you.
Credit for that update and recommendation. Ms. Jostley, did you want to provide any other insight?
When we get that report or those evidence or whatever that we need for our case, we always meet with our families, the families that we're working with, the victims that we're working with. If it's a child, then we work with either the parents, the grandparents, whoever is taking care of the child legally. So throughout our process, we always introduce ourselves and let the families know this is what happened, this is where we're at, this is when we got the report. And because sometimes it is true when it's late and they're finally hearing from us and they get upset with us because they think, oh, you guys are slow in doing this. But we don't get information until way later. So sometimes that puts us in a bind with our case. And then the judges that we have in our federal court, they ask, why is this case so old and you're finally presenting it in federal court? So those things do happen. Another thing that I wanted to bring up sort of in this conversation is reports from Navajo Police Department. I don't know who we can address this to, or if you can help us with that, Madam Chair. Victims that we're working with, sometimes they want a report because some of these resources, especially if it's a death, crime victims usually want a police report or who the responding person was. And sometimes those are delayed for us to to do some resource and help with the referral, but we're often stuck at where these victims have to pay for these police reports. And sometimes these victims, they have nothing. They leave with nothing at all. So we're trying to help them get resources and some help for them, at least, for the next couple of days. But they're stuck on trying to get this report, and they're waiting and waiting. The wait is far too long for them to wait to get these reports. And, I think we all understand that everybody is busy. But when something traumatic happens to a victim, and then we're waiting for these reports, sometimes they're not ready when they're told to come back. And they're lacking transportation. And we also assist in not just the federal court. We're here to assist even with Navajo Nation when that happens to the victims that we work with, their families as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Jocelyn, for those recommendations. We do have our staffers who are writing down all of your recommendations. And as our subcommittee, in the areas that we focus in on, we have what we call a logic model. And so we identify critical areas that the subcommittee can take action on. And this subcommittee is a representation of all of the different committees on the Navajo Nation Council. And so we also lean on our other oversights to help us when there's other systemic issues. I do see Delegate James in the chat box has asked, when was the last time all departments were involved in a victims of violence work session? And is there a possibility to restructure the process? And so in my opinion, the last time we had a collective conversation regarding victim services was when we were developing the Dante action plan, and violence was identified, and the area of victim services was not really developed, but we can use that as a suggestion. That advisory board or this committee can also prioritize providing victim services, and we can continue to work collectively to keep all of the programs accountable so that we could reduce the process to help our relatives who are have been victimized and targeted. So I just want to offer that, Delegate James. I don't know if you have any other suggestions, because what we're hearing here is some major shortfalls that land on Navajo Nation being accountable. And so I appreciate the delegates who are on the call and others, because when we bring these issues to the forefront, there has to be action. So whether it's funding, we can identify if there needs to be some laws or policies amended through council. But as we move forward, I think we now know what services are needed and how we can collectively work together. So I want to see Delegate James, did you have a follow-up question, Chair?
Yeah, Nana dan Shimasan. Kodo Bahnadish Kedo Lehiki. Yeah, this will be my last one. A Kate the not the dish kill. Did wish cheat up in Sekisiki. Be gone what our open on the shitty enigi. What a higi slap nehe hollow. Oko quite in or skin so data best cheat up in Sekisi or skin so be at the dot in. This law has under Nana Quajetam Chenet Tastuisan, the Nastas ne Ajik des Igipet has under Nana and Hin has under Dance under what art Ashaiki is what a higi best cheat is or what any here hollow what are Ibana des Kidole.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Delegate James. So, Ms. Preston, did you want to try to offer some suggestions? It's *6 to unmute.
Oh, hello. I'm sorry, I didn't get the
No
question.
problem.
I'm so sorry. What, can you please repeat the question?
Sure, Delegate James.
Thank you, Don Shimasane. My question was in regards to shared document. Do you guys have some kind of database shared document to where all the departments can just log into that shared document database to get the information? Or is it all still standard paper documents that shift between all of the departments? Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Delegate James. Ms. Preston, did you want to offer some insight to that? Thank you.
Yes. The FBI does have a system, but we are not allowed to share. A lot of sharing information happens like an MDT. You know, when we make directly with our other law enforcement partners, we would share that information. So what we have in our system is it will be the agent's responsibility to share with the CI. And then, you know, when they do an investigative report, and if we are not going to take it, if it's not, or it's declined from the U.S. attorney, all those documents are given back to criminal investigator. Or I think there was talks about sending them directly to the prosecutor's office. But I hear agents talk about getting the whole investigative report together and it's turned over to the CI so they can, you know, take it at the tribal level. As far as releasing the police reports, I know we can't release our reports to the victims. We're not allowed to do that. As far as the Navajo Police Department, I think as a advocate myself, you kind of have to get a little bit creative, you know, to get services to your victims. So what I do is I always make sure there is a report number. You know, whenever a report's made, an allegation is made, I make sure that victims' family make a police report and get the number. So when we get involved, the CIs will give us a police report so that we can look into the case. So I share that police report with if they want service, immediate victim services, counseling. You know, I do share that. I attach it to the victim comp application because those police report is very important to get their application processed and approved. So that once they give it to our office, then I would attach it to the victim comp application. And I mean, I file so many, you know, and they're very good about having them get counseling paid for, even reimbursement for a ceremony. If the family went to a medicine man for a ceremony, they out-of-pocket expense are given back. So, yeah, the victims do not get a copy of it. I know that. They request it, but oftentimes they're told that they have to go to Window Rock to get it. There's a fee involved. But when we have it, we're not allowed to release it to the police, to the victims too. So it's, you know, we refer them back to Navajo Nation if they want a report. Okay, so that's kind of how we share information on a case, but it's not, you know, I would say probably email, but we also, it's an investigation process, so we also have to be careful on what, you know, we give out as well. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Ms. Preston. I appreciate that response. Delegate James?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Delegate James, for those critical questions. What I wanted to add to this conversation is in the work of providing services to our sexual assault survivors, domestic violence, human trafficking, our missing and murdered, data is critically, is the challenge, and the type of how the different programs communicate. Last year, one of the data, like JustWare, was phased out. And so a lot of our Navajo Nation programs are entering into different data servers. And so as a nation, we should be giving some advice in terms of policy, how that data is shared, who it's shared with, and most importantly, how that's analyzed. And so there is a proposal to fund a data institute. I know in the efforts of law enforcement to collect for all of our missing and murdered, I received an update that our BIA partners are allowing Navajo Nation criminal investigators to start inputting their data into their system, and that they will hire someone to help us. And so we appreciate that support, but that is just an immediate solution to some of the challenges when we talk about data. So for the subcommittee, in an ideal situation, we would have a report for at least the last year on what is happening in our communities, and especially in the districts that we represent. And so the goal is to have access to that data so that we could make data-driven decision-making, and that we can start working with families, especially those community members who are in cycles of violence. So I do want to say, I saw Ms. Shepherd had her hand raised. Ms. Shepherd, did you have something to offer the committee while we start to wrap up this report? Thank you.
Yes, real quick. Another thing with just sharing information, reporting, maybe connecting and building some bridges within law enforcement. We know that there's, and maybe even an update with the victim rights information. With here in Flagstaff, we have created a partnership with the police department, where they are able to share if there's a victim involved. And so we are here in Flagstaff, we're called right away, and including the hospital. And then I know that maybe a connection or an invitation to the table to Department of Corrections, as they currently right now in Tuba City for sure, they are the only entity who receives the victim information, and they contact the victim that is noted in the case when the individual is being released or something has changed. And it's really crucial with that time frame, as when someone is arrested, they're only held from anywhere from 8 to 36 hours. And it's really important for those service, for advocates in general, to have access to that information so we can get in there to provide an order of protection, or to get to shelter, or to figure out any type of safety planning involved with that incident and with the situation in general before that individual gets out of jail. Because if we can get to that person, to the victim in question while that individual is still in custody, we're able to apply for a order of protection and have that served right away, as it's more difficult when the person's released and then back home and the process starts again, or just is a long list of things that can happen afterwards. So maybe providing those connections and partnership or invitation to the table. Here from the jails, we get arrest reports right away every morning. The court sends us information on hearings every morning. So maybe even developing some type of policy or procedure around that would be super helpful in accessing and helping victims right away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shadeja, Ms. Shepherd, for those recommendations, and our staff who are keeping track. We do have a sexual assault prevention working group. We meet every Friday from 8 to 10, and so we will if you are interested in joining that conversation, please send myself or Lorraine, our advisor, your email, and that's where we do the work of what's provided here and recommendations from the committee. So thank you for those recommendations. I appreciate that. Committee members, are there any other questions?
Delegate Crotty, this is Delegate Charles Newton. I am on the call and I have a couple of questions.
Oh, yeah, they said it, Chair Charles Newton, thank you for joining the call. Yes, Chair Charles Newton, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Shadeja, Delegate Crotty, and also thank you for the information regarding this report. My first question is, with the database, if I can get a little bit more information about this database, because I am getting ready to leave DC here. We had a meeting with Bureau of Indian Affairs earlier this week, and we talked about the importance of getting a database in place for criminal investigation. Currently, police department has a database they use, and that's the TODI. But I learned that PD doesn't allow criminal investigations to use that database. So I asked criminal investigators to come up with, three options that they're interested in terms of the database that they could be using to collect information. And so I wanted to drop legislation to get some funding for that database. And that really is crucial because we learned that there are 4 factors that BIA takes into consideration when allocating funds to criminal investigations, to law enforcement, and then also to our detention center. One of those factors is the data that's collected for violent crimes. And the other one that's also data-driven is the activity for gang violence. And so we learned that, some information is not getting reported. So if anything, we know that has always been the case, that in Navajo, there's a lot of underreporting that's happening. And so my hope is that with this database that we can start collecting right information that will help 638 funding in terms of the money that's being allocated here to Navajo. So if I can just get a little bit more information about the database that you all are talking about. The other issue is protecting, victims of crime. We recently, 3 weeks ago, we asked the Navajo Nation Prosecutor's Office to change or to make recommendations to change the law to allow individuals to be held longer than the current, I think it's up to like 12 hours, and then the other one is up to 36 hours. And every district is different in the way that is being applied, but we did ask the prosecutors to provide us some recommendations on how we can, what we can do to keep individuals longer, and most importantly, to bring them before the judge, because we learned that there are a lot of people who do go through, they go to detention, they get arrested, and then they sign a document saying that they will appear before the judge, but oftentimes they don't. And I know that in Crown Point, there was 2 file drawers that were devoted to individuals who did not appear and where warrants were issued for their arrest. The problem was, PD is so stretched thin right now that they weren't able to go out and even with an arrest warrant, they weren't able to arrest individuals to bring them back to court. So we did task the prosecutor's office to try to address that question, and I was hoping that we could get it addressed by fall session, but they didn't. It was not something I think that was going to really help victims. If anything, they were so focused on the rights of, the criminals the people who are being, who are being, who are the other party in the issue. that I told them as chairwoman that I could not sponsor that legislation because I felt like it wasn't really doing any justice to victims. And Honorable Eugene So said he would try to move it forward. But there was also some concerns about the recommendations that they gave that I think we need to go back to the table and really, try to encourage or try to inform the prosecutor's office about the importance of victims and then also what's happening with the catch and release. So I just wanted to just kind of chime in to ask that question regarding the database and then also to share information in terms of what we're trying to do to amend Title 17 to help assist victims during this process. And the other thing that we also learned is that when victims do report these incidents, the retaliation often is more severe because the individual goes to jail, they come back, and then they take it back out on the family members or the person who called the police on them, which really defeats the purpose of holding an individual, during a cooling off period so that they don't go back and do anything worse to the victim. But we also learned that that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are afraid to call the police right now is because they know that even if they do call the police, the individual will be released within a matter of hours. So just something I wanted to share. I'm sorry. I'm in a cab right now heading to the airport. I'm heading back to New Mexico, but I just wanted to share that information and let you know that we are trying to address that. And I think that, sitting down with the prosecutor's office to make those recommendations is going to be crucial as we move the Title 17 amendment forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair Charleston. I appreciate those insights and recommendations and the questions. So we will provide a summary of what's been reported to the committee. I'll rely on staff to provide that as we update our subcommittee logic model. In terms of the database, the focus has been on enhancing law enforcement database. So it looks like they'll be working with VIA law enforcement based out of Gallup, and we could get additional information. The other database that we are working on is with Dante College, and that's actually to analyze and working with what's being provided. And so that's going to be more of this holistic approach on what is happening here on the nation. And we can follow up with Mr. Jackson was on the line, but he had a hard stop at 12 o'clock. And so we could ask Acting Chief Prosecutor the time frame and for the Office of the Prosecutor to make those recommendations and other amendments to Title 17. So thank you for those questions. As we end, this report is on victim services. Are there any other questions from our committee members before we move to the vote? Okay, thank you very much. And so travel safe, and we will move on to the report. So committee members, if there's no other questions, I just want to thank Shaded, Blanda, and Cindy and Savannah for providing insight, and of course Shadeja Laurel for really taking on the challenge on how are we going to develop and design victim services. Because in my experience, I do agree with Ms. Preston that Navajo Nation has tried in the past to provide victim services, and that we've seen a reduction in the last few years on victim services, and we've also seen this kind of centralization, and our advocates tend to have to go off record to ask for requests for support, and so that's why our move is to move forward with how do we have this comprehensive plan for victim services. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to ask Shada and Ms. Woody if you could help me with the roll call vote. Thank you. Yeah.
Excuse me, this is Savannah Joe at the U.S. Attorney's Office. If you don't mind, I would like to, I have a couple of recommendations.
Oh, Ms. Joe, yes, we'll pause the vote if you could provide your recommendations. Thank you.
My apologies. I would request that if you are going to have another meeting and have some input, I would recommend that you invite the Sexual Assault Services of Northwest New Mexico, given that quite a few victims on Navajo go to SAS there in Farmington, New Mexico, or in Gallup or Shiprock to receive SANE exams, in addition to wraparound services. They do have their own database. In addition to that, they have a better picture as far as victims that come forward and do not report to law enforcement, but did receive a SANE exam through their facility. And I know that you've been part of their meetings, but I think it would be important to include them in discussions or hear their recommendations and perhaps request the data that they do have. In addition to that, I would recommend to include SORNA, and I know that a while back you hosted the SORNA, I don't know who the SORNA person is, I cannot think of her name, but she presented a very comprehensive PowerPoint. Yes, and she might already be part of this discussion, but certainly I would include SORNA in those discussions. In addition to that, let's see, probation, knowing that they're in charge of, keeping track of these offenders that are released, or if they are out pending trial. I think it's important just to hear their perspective and just get some information from them. And in addition to that, as you're building this, I think that it's important to, as you've already stated, that you are doing this in a very comprehensive manner, but keeping in mind that, victims of violence need robust and immediate support in the wake of violence, not only for direct victims, but also for loved ones and neighbors who are also deeply impacted by the trauma of violent acts within their community. With that, please let me know how we could assist or be part of that discussion and share our roles and how we can support your program as you go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Shadeja, and for always providing insight and thoughtful consideration on how to support our survivors of violence. I will add your information to our work group invite, and if you're able to, on Fridays from 8 to 10 is where we try to really drill down on some of these issues, and it's a working group, and so it just allows us time to really hone in on some of these systemic challenges. So thank you for that recommendation. Committee members, are there any other questions? Not hearing questions. Shada and Ms. Woody, please help us with Delegate Tiaz, Delegate Eugene So, your question.
It's not a question, but it's in regards to the advocate. The whole committee regards to好多是出咗事的，也大多其他我一次。Victims impacts audit as Angie, and it is part of, if you really look at it, like if you experienced it, and like I always, every now and then we think about my sisters that were my oldest and the youngest. One was just disappeared for so many years, and it reminds me of what you did trying to look for her. Like me, I went. There's a lot of gangs in the Washington That's what runs Mount Chimney, Arizona. So people don't, they have to go back in before the sun goes down. Anyway, so that's the area where I rode my horse trying to look for something that I could see, even though I don't want to see it. My sister was buried somewhere or something like that. But these are some issues that, you know, the victims.
Yes, she has Delegate. So you, are you finished asking your question, Chef, or are you having some technical challenges? Okay, I think Delegate So is having some technical challenges, but if we could, Delegate So has lost both of his sisters to violence, terrible violence, and he is concerned on how families are notified of investigations or prosecution. And so before we leave or vote on this report, is there any recommendations or how can we support those families who have been waiting or are waiting for some type of update regarding their particular cases? Ms. Preston or Ms. Cindy, if you wanted to provide some guidance, clarification, recommendations on how we could support those families.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Cindy. Like I had said before, any of our cases that we get in our U.S. Attorney's Office, and this is for the District of New Mexico, we always inform our families of what we're doing, what we're going to do next. They also have an input if our office wants to offer, say, like a plea agreement with a defendant. We always have the family's input, the victim's input on if they feel like that they're comfortable with that, if they have any questions. Our prosecutors, our attorneys are very, very good in meeting with our victims. And in our cases, we call them Indian country cases. That's how we address our cases from the reservation. So that's where, when we said I'm the middle person between the court, the prosecutor, or any other services that they're going to receive, I make sure that the victims are comfortable in receiving this information. Sometimes they're not, and they are encouraged to voice their concerns, and we listen. The prosecutors, the attorneys that we have, listen to them very well. And sometimes victims will say, well, I'm ready to go to court. I'm ready to go to trial. Instead of offering this plea agreement, I'm ready to do this. So we often listen to them and let them know what the next steps will be. Sometimes the prosecutor will let them know this might be the best decision we're making, or we're not getting any response back from the defendant and his attorney or her attorney. So often when those things happen, then we're going to trial. But even through our trial, I'm there. I'm there with the victims every step of the way. Our victim advocates are all of them, whatever cases they carry. When we have a trial, we are there. We even help support our Navajo Nation police officers, criminal investigators. We make them comfortable. We make sure that they're there with us to help us, you know, get a successful case, and that everybody has a way of healing after we complete our case. And when Savannah mentioned that our case takes at least up to a year, sometimes more than that, that's because we're making and getting to know the families that we're working with. And we want to get everything that we need on our case, evidence, any discovery that we have, all the interviews that we have. Sometimes it's just not the victims. We also have witnesses that we're working with. And then we need location. If an incident happens on the Navajo Nation, we're just not working directly with either criminal investigations or police department. We involve land status people, certificate of Indian blood, that office, that's who we're working with. So we're connecting with all these different resources, making sure that we know what we're doing in our case so we can get a good result at the end for the victims or either their families, the next of kin. That's what we do. So I hope that answers some of that question. So even when we do have a cold case come up, we just don't return a lot of these cases to Navajo Nation. I've seen our prosecutors meeting with victims and letting them know if we have more evidence, we're more than welcome to reopen this case for you. We will help with what we can. So that's what we relay to our victims, and that's how we address our victims and how we talk to them. Thank you.
Shada, thank you for that. So what we can do in our recommendation and for a future report is to talk about those cold cases in particular. I'll get additional information from Delegate So and some of our other families who have contacted the committee and myself regarding their cases, and we'll provide and have a conversation about how and what type of support we can provide in terms of updates and letting their families know. So thank you for that. Committee members, I do want to recognize for the record, we do have Delegate Wilson with us, Wilson Stewart, I apologize, she has. Thank you for joining us, and we are now going to vote on our first report unless there's any other questions from the committee. Hearing none, Shada, Ms. Woody, please, if you could provide the roll call, thank you. The voting roll call.
Okay, Honorable Madam Chair, the vote for the receiver report motion was made by Vince James, second by Nathaniel Brown. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes green.
Honorable Brown votes green. Honorable Paul Begay. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Eugene So, how do you vote? Honorable Eugene So, how do you vote? Honorable Wilson Stewart Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Honorable Stewart votes green. Let me go back to Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Eugene So, how do you vote? Madam Chair, only 2 members are responding to the question and voting. Honorable James and Honorable So are not responding to the vote. So there's 2-0-1 is the vote.
Oh, yeah, Shada. I do see Delegate James on the Zoom call. He might be having some technical issues. Shiaz, if you can help us with your vote so that we are continue with our quorum, if you could chat either your vote or text it into our staff. And I'm not exactly sure Delegate So's number, but I do not see him on the call. So if I could just delay the vote, we do need to have quorum.
Madam Chair, this is Maureen. I don't think Mr.
Yes.
So is on the line.
Okay. Can you contact, I do see Delegate James is on the line. Can you contact Delegate James? I just don't want to move forward with another action, or I couldn't take official action if we don't have quorum. And so we'll give him a minute, and if not, we'll continue with our report from this morning from the Washington office. And I apologize, Ms. Lewis, to your team. While you were providing the report, we were able to secure quorum, but I appreciate your team members who were on the line to listen to the discussion, as this is a critical area on Navajo, and it's going to take the coordination of all three branches, and we addressed this in the Dennett Action Plan. But now as we move forward, we are going to have to create some timelines to provide support and relief to our community members. So I'm going to call, I could wait on the line for Mr. James' vote. And what I'll do, committee members, and in respect of your time and everyone else's time on the call, I'm going to go back to the report from the Washington office. Delegate Stewart, this was emailed out to all of the 24 Navajo Nation Council this morning. It's called the OVW, I think, Tribal Consultation. For those participants who are on the Zoom, the link is in our chat, or if you have access to social media, it is also on the report can be accessible through the Navajo Nation Council's Facebook or my delegate Amber Candace-Bach-Crotty Facebook. And that's not a plug. I don't keep it as active because we have a lot going on. But I'm going to go back to Ms. Lewis to finish her report. I know we were about to open it up for questions. So please let me know if you wanted to provide any more insight in now hearing the report from our federal partners on how they provide services to our sexual assault victims of crime. Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you, Chairwoman, Delegate Amber Crotty. I do just want to mention that on the line I have Deputy Executive Maxine Hillary, who has been quite involved with all of our actions regarding missing and murdered Indigenous women. And I also have Cal Curley, who handles the public safety portfolio for the Navajo Nation Washington office. And before I jump right into additional comments, I didn't properly introduce myself earlier, so I just wanted just to take a brief moment for everybody on the line. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dante Lewis, Executive Director for the Navajo Nation Washington office. Thank you again for the opportunity to participate in today's conversation. We are also very grateful for the federal government having the opportunity to provide comments, additional comments on the Violence Against Women's Act and how it is working in Indian country. So just for everybody's information, the Office on Violence Against Women was created as part of VAWA, and they are responsible for conducting a government-to-government consultation with tribes on the behalf of the U.S. Attorney General every single year. So they've had these consultations since 2005, and so this year marked the 16th annual tribal consultation that this office initiated. And so I believe that the initial, I guess, announcement was sort of like a save the date that was sent out to tribal leaders back in April of 2021. Thereafter, we would get intermittent notices about this upcoming tribal consultation. So as the day drew near, I think when we really got involved was right prior to the virtual consultation, which was a 3-day event. It was held August 17th through the 20th, and again, it was a virtual government-to-government tribal consultation. And so just prior to that consultation meeting, the Office on Violence Against Women issued a framing paper, and the framing paper just they posed a number of questions to tribal communities, just asking about what's needed, what would you like to see happen. So there was just a long list of questions that were posed, and those framing questions were intended to help tribal communities develop written comments to the federal government. And so written testimony was due October 22nd, 2021, and our approach to drafting drafting comments on behalf of the Navajo Nation was to look at the past year and even 2 years on comments from various meetings and participants, I guess Navajo Nation government participants. And so in looking at that, we looked at past testimonial statements, we looked at past comment letters, and an integral piece to that was our most recent engagement with the government accountability offices, where they heard from the Office of the Prosecutor, the Division of Public Safety, members of Navajo leadership, as well as public stakeholders. And so that conversation was critical to drafting a comment letter. So the letter that was shared with the committee members, it is 11 pages long, and we tried to keep it short, but also touch on as many aspects of this issue. And again, it is a very complex, it's very complicated, and I just want to just acknowledge that just acknowledge the complexity of this issue. So it's broken out into 6 different parts, and basically Section 2 focuses on strengthening the tribal and federal relationship, and that's where we discuss the complementary efforts. In other words, how is the Navajo Nation working with federal stakeholders to respond to some of the domestic violence cases or MMIW cases, just that full spectrum. And so some of the things that have been, that we have heard quite frequently is, one, the increase of federal prosecution of domestic violence cases on the Navajo Nation. I guess ensuring timely law enforcement responses, support for enforcing tribal court orders and judgments, and then ensuring that agencies with jurisdiction over Indian country are involved in interagency efforts regarding domestic violence cases and other MMIW, I guess, crimes. And so with that piece, I think that some of the conversation that we've heard this morning from the reports really go to highlighting how we need to continue working with our federal counterparts to just to strengthen not only prosecution, but also our judicial system and also victim services. So I'm really glad to be part of today's conversation and to hear some of the statements that were made. Section 3 of the comment letter, again, focuses on another aspect of the tribal-federal relationship. However, here we talked about improved data collection and sharing. So again, the support for more robust and collaborative data collection and sharing. We've heard all too often that information from the federal government doesn't come to the tribe, and vice versa. The tribe isn't sharing a lot of information with the federal government. So just the need to support that collaborative effort. 2, support for missing and murdered Indigenous women initiatives, and then also facilitating greater communication between the U.S. Attorney's Office and tribes. And lastly, the need to create a dedicated crisis hotline. So those items are discussed in section 2 of the comment letter. In section 3, going on to section 4, this is where we spoke about strengthening tribal programs, specifically funds that are awarded to tribal governments to administer, I guess, public safety programs or I guess other programs that support, protecting women and children and families. So this is where we hone in on grant and other financial support provided to tribes. So here we focus on ensuring that there's grants, but also increased federal grant initiatives for non-competitive grants, because we know that in most cases grants are provided. However, they are very competitive, and then too often what we see at the national level, from our perspective, is that some of the grant awards are capped at, say, $500,000, or sometimes it's a very small amount that doesn't necessarily, I guess, allow for the Navajo Nation to make a real big impact. So we want to make sure that when grant opportunities are afforded to Indian country, that they consider the unique attributes of each tribal government. So considering not only just population, but landmass, and maybe the unique capacity of each respective tribe. And so that's where we talk about some of the grants. We also spoke about how that there also has to be Native representation in the peer review process. So after tribes, should they submit an application for a grant opportunity, usually they are peer reviewed and scored. And so in that process, we want to ensure that there is Native representation, so then that way folks who are evaluating grants going to Indian country are familiar with Indian country. I think that is extremely critical as we hold our federal counterparts accountable. And then we, of course, some of the comments we've heard earlier were also reflected in this document, such as increased funding for internet connectivity, increased funding for victim services, and then increased funding for early childhood development and trauma detection initiatives. Going on to the last two parts of the document, number 5 was just highlighting the need to respect tribal autonomy in criminal punishment. And then the last piece of it focused on legislative actions. What would we like to see with a federal framework? And if you look at the last part of the document, that's where we re-emphasize our support for HR 1620, which is intended to provide concurrent tribal criminal jurisdiction over categories of crimes that were overlooked by the reauthorization of VAWA in 2013, and then also an expansion of grant funding opportunities. And so that's something that the nation should certainly support, just given what there's currently introduced legislation that could help solve some of these issues. And then, of course, I think what the nation should also be supporting, which was also concurred by other Navajo Nation leaders, which is support for a permanent reauthorization of VAWA. I think, and expanded tribal jurisdiction, because all too often what we see is that laws are passed, however, they have a sunset date, and that reauthorization has to continue every, for some period of time. And so, just given how this issue has culminated over, decades, and we don't foresee this ever getting addressed in anytime in the near future. So perhaps a permanent reauthorization and expanded tribal jurisdiction is probably one key solution that the Navajo Nation can support. So, so the support so the comment letter, you know, we were trying to ensure that all of the different perspectives over the last year were incorporated into this document. We did have such a short time frame to put the final touches on it, and then it was routed for signature by President Nez and Jonathan Nez, and Vice President Myron Leiser. And so that's the document that you see before you. However, we would still like to work with this subcommittee and the members to ensure that we do have continued support. And one of the comments that I stated earlier is, if this document did not include a recommendation that you feel should be in this, then we are happy to supplement our comment letter with those recommendations that the subcommittee would like us to make. Again, we are grateful for this opportunity. We appreciate the federal government's continued engagement on this matter, and we look forward to assisting this subcommittee to also forward your goals and recommendations. So that concludes my report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Shadeja, for that report. I'm going to pause, and it looks like we're able to fix our technical issues, and we have our committee members back on the line and able to vote. So committee, we paused with our official action on voting for the report. I do now see Delegate James and Delegate So have both provided their vote via text. Ms. Woody, can you let me now know for the record what is the vote regarding that report?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, who texted in the vote now?
Delegate Vince James text in green for the report, and Delegate So text in green for the report, and they are both back online listening to the conversation.
Okay. Okay, Honorable Vice Chair, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. Now we have, they voted in green by via text. You have 401 as the final vote.
Thank you, Ms. Woody, I appreciate that. And so now moving on to the report number 2, I do need a motion, colleagues, and a second regarding the report from the Washington office. Colleagues, you might be on mute. Oh, thank you, Delegate Stewart. Motion, a second.
Okay, Shisha.
Thank you. She has Delegate So seconds the report. Ms. Lewis and her team have provided the information. Committee members, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you, committee members. I know.
Second?
Yes.
Okay, this is Delegate Brown. I'll second.
Vice Chair Brown, we did receive a second from Delegate So. Do you happen to have any questions regarding the report?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brown. So this is a lengthy report. It is 11 pages. Committee members, if you can review and then provide any recommendations, we could add this into some of our priority points and make recommendations as amendments as we move forward. There are several tribal consultations throughout the year. And so this is helpful as we move forward with official positions of the Navajo Nation and how collectively we will be working together to support our communities and to really invest in the healing of our nation. The only area that I wanted to ask Ms. Lewis is in terms of how to present those recommendations, I did notice in the document, it refers to the Office of the President and Vice President Working Group. If you can provide the information that the working group provided, that will help me understand what was the working group's recommendations. We are trying to bridge the communication behind President's working group and the efforts at the legislative and judicial branch. So that would be helpful in terms of what was provided, as there's other entities that are certainly collecting the work. And I would have requested that this subcommittee and the council be recognized in future written statements, as a majority of our time is invested in gathering, collecting, and providing solutions in these areas. So I just wanted to provide that comment, and I look forward to future discussions on how the document can be amended, and others be able to provide what we also need is data. In looking at our murder rate and homicide rate, Navajo Nation per capita, we're 4 times higher than the national average. And it's something that we reported to Dr. Jill Biden, First Lady Jill Biden, when she visits the Navajo Nation, and the amount of gender-based violence that we see here in our communities. And so something in terms of, for Navajo Nation and our uniqueness, is a lot of the crimes that we see are committed by either relatives or another Navajo. So our nation's attempt, we can go after broadening our jurisdiction or our prosecution, but we also have to be accountable in terms of strengthening the existing system that we have here. And so that means more funding and more services and training and communication. So I hope we could continue to have these conversations either at the NET advisory group level, or every month on the 3rd Friday, this committee comes together and we talk about these very serious situations when it comes to sexual assault happening, and the prevention work that we need to do as a nation. So I just wanted to offer those suggestions and see what your comments are. Thank you, Shadeja, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you, Shada, Madam Chair Crotty. I appreciate those comments and also the additional insight. I do apologize for the oversight on our part in terms of not recognizing the work of the subcommittee, or actually not recognizing the subcommittee in the report. I think that we do recognize your work, and that's reflected in the comments. However, we need to actually recognize the subcommittee. And so we will definitely make sure that is known. We need to also make sure that other groups, and should there be other, other advocacy groups that want to ensure that those comments are reflected in future comment letters, we are more than happy to attend those meetings, so then that way we can listen to them and consider those comments and any recommendations that they may have, because we know that some of the strongest recommendations come from the people who have, I know this, like, sadly experienced this. They have lost family members. Their relatives have become victims, or perhaps they are domestic violence victims as well. And so we want to make sure that those stories or maybe their experiences are somewhat captured in the recommendations that we put forth on behalf of the Navajo Nation. So we are more than happy to be further engaged. Thank you for sharing how frequently you guys meet. Again, I have the Deputy Executive Director, Maxine Hillary, who is quite active on this portfolio, as well as Mr. Cal Curley, who handles our public safety portfolio. And when I'm not available, either of them will certainly represent our office. And again, we are truly grateful for this the subcommittee and all of the terrific work you are doing. And as far as supplementing the record, we can certainly work on an additional letter that comes from the subcommittee, and or we can even work with maybe the legislative advisor to draft a resolution. I don't know what the preference is of this subcommittee. I don't know if you guys have a preference over a resolution or a letter, but I think that those two are possibilities in terms of supplementing the record, and we are more than willing to work with you on that. So that's my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Shadeja. Ms. Lewis, I appreciate that feedback, and we could work with our staff to coordinate and see if it's a letter or a resolution. So I appreciate that. Committee members, are there any other questions or recommendations to Ms. Lewis and her team at our Washington office? Not hearing any. I just want to thank Ms. Lewis for your time and dedication on this. I know it was a short turnaround, but I am glad that we are on the record supporting the needs of Navajo Nation, and we'll continue to work with our coalitions and our groups to strengthen the document. At this time, if there's no questions, committee members, I'll ask Shade, Ms. Woody to provide the roll call vote. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon again. Madam Chair, the roll call for the vote on the report. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James, how do you vote?
Sorry, Delegate Brown votes green.
Thank you, Delegate Brown. Votes green. Honorable Vince James, how do you vote?
Mr. James votes green via text. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable James. He votes green. Honorable Eugene So, how do you vote?
Oh, is Dr. Chair.
Thank you, Eugene So. He votes green. Honorable Wilson Stewart, how do you vote?
Green, Shma.
Thank you, Shiaj. Honorable Stewart votes green. Madam Chair, you have 4 members voting. 401 is the vote.
Yeah, Shade, I appreciate that. Thank you, committee members, and Shadeja, Ms. Lewis, and your team on the call. Shania Calcurley, Bill Shemayeje, Ms. Maxine Hillary, we appreciate that. So moving on to our agenda, 6, old business none, 7, new business none, 8, close of the meeting. Committee members, are there any announcements before we motion to adjourn? I'm not hearing any announcements, so we'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
This is Delegate Brown. I'll motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brown. Motions to adjourn. A second?
Stewart.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Delegate Stewart seconds the motion. Any questions? Next meeting, we do, according to our establishment, we meet every 3rd Friday. So that's going to be November 19th from 10 at 10 o'clock. I know that's a week right before Thanksgiving, and so we will try to make sure we keep that into consideration as we develop the agenda. And if committee members, if you have any recommendations or those on the call, please contact myself or Lorraine Spencer. And it does take some time to coordinate and get individuals on the call. So we appreciate your feedback. Shada, Ms. Woody, can you help me with the roll call vote? Thank you.
Takashila, Shada, Deja. The vote tally right now, voting for the adjournment. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes in favor.
Honorable Vince James, how do you vote? Honorable Vince James, how do you vote?
Madam Chair, Honorable Vince James votes green via text.
Honorable Vince James votes green. Honorable Eugene So, how do you vote? Honorable Eugene So, how do you vote? Honorable Eugene So votes green. Honorable Wilson C. Stewart Jr., how do you vote?
Greens, ma.
Yes, Honorable Stewart votes green. Madam Chair, you have 4 affirmative, so the vote is 4-0-1. Thank you.
Okay, Shada, thank you for that. Thank you, committee members. Give yourself some time. I know we talked about some pretty serious issues, so go out and just give yourself some love. And so we'll reconvene next month. Take care of one another, and we end the call. Thank you. So Lorene, as we end the call, I sent a few individuals who are interested in our work group. Would you be able to help me coordinate a calendar invite and a Zoom for next Friday from 8 to 10?
Okay, and then what will be the discussion?
The discussion will be the follow-up from today's meeting. So we'll finish the logic model, and then we'll do any follow-ups from today's meeting, the recommendations for victim services. So we don't need to invite anyone per se. We just need to have that part.
The one that you're going to send me, right? Okay. All right, I'll work with Speaker's office to set up that Zoom meeting. Thank you.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great weekend. We'll see you guys.